Our session today is titled Pakistan Between the US and China. This session brings together Dr. Wali Nasser, Professor of International Affairs and Middle East Studies at Johns Hopkins University. He has served as Dean of the School of Advanced International Studies, advised US policies on Pakistan and Afghanistan, and is the author of several influential books on global politics. He will be in conversation with Ms. Hina Rabbani Khar, a Pakistani stateswoman and economist who has served as Pakistan's 26th foreign minister and the country's first female foreign minister. She has held senior roles in economic and foreign policy making and is one of the most prominent women in Pakistani politics. Moderating this session is Mr. Raza Rumi, a policy analyst, journalist, and editor. He is currently the editor of the Friday Times, the chief editor of Naya Daur Media, and a public policy specialist and instructor. With that, I invite our speakers to begin the discussion.
Thank you. Great to be back at the Think Fest, and of course, really privileged to be in the company of Dr. Wali Nasser and Hina Rabbani Khar, who have been introduced, and real pleasure as well to be spending the next 1 hour in conversation on something that is really, at the center of the anxiety in Pakistan, in the public domain at least, as to what is going to happen in the coming years as the US-China rivalry or competition, whatever you want to call it, deepens, and where does Pakistan stand, and how is Pakistan going to navigate that particular tension. Pakistan's situation is also unique, as you all know. More than 80% or nearly 80% of its defense supplies are coming from China, while Pakistan's economic dependence on Western multilateral institutions like the IMF and the World Bank is also well known. And so between these two imperatives, the country is straddling and undertaking a balancing act. And our panelists, very distinguished in their own areas, have a great sense of not only where things are headed, but have their own personal views as well. And I will invite them to speak about this particular topic, but we'll try and finish early so that we leave a lot of time for your questions and answers, because I think that I'm sure you have also many questions for our panelists. So may I start with you, Dr. Nasser? And often in Pakistan, we ask this question: what does America want from Pakistan? What are the demands? So in the past, we knew war on terror and this and that, and now, of course, counterterrorism, or which other areas, because that would also kind of define or help understand Pakistan's positioning in its balancing act between the US and the Chinese. The mic.
Well, thank you very much, Raza. It's great to be on this panel with you and Hina as well. We're at a very peculiar time. So the question is, first of all, which United States are we talking about? There is the United States, the institutions, the state, the machinery of the government, and then there is President Trump. I think we're in a very peculiar situation in which essentially Pakistan is enjoying a honeymoon, or a very special circumstance in which it has found a very direct relationship with the president. And the president is very enamored with Pakistan, and particularly with at least a particular figure in Pakistan.
You could say Field Marshal.
Field
it's
Marshal.
Okay.
I have to watch out where I put my foot. I just arrived yesterday. With the Field Marshal, all of which is extremely new. What is not very clear is that in this sort of a high-level person-to-person relationship, what is it exactly being asked and what is exactly being given. So number one, but I would say that the machinery of government, I don't think Pakistan's situation and relationship with the US has actually changed. So it's just that the machinery of government is not right now not influential. But you went from war on terror to a period where the United States was not really asking anything in particular of Pakistan. So Pakistan went from being, at the center stage time when I was working the Obama administration to almost struggling to be noticed in Washington. And then I don't think that has changed in the machinery of the government, but with President Trump is a very particular scenario. And then the other side of it is there too, which is that India's relationship with the United States has also fumbled massively. And this relationship of Pakistan to Washington was always, in an untold way, always had a pairing, which was what was happening with India and the US, and India and the US were on an upward trajectory for business reasons, for economic reasons, and also for China reasons for a very long time. And the collapse of that is also highly personal. As if you go to the machinery of the US government, the view on India hasn't changed at all. It's at the White House that it has changed, and there, the pairing has been disturbed. So Pakistan is operating, if you would, in a vacuum at the White House, at White House level. Now, two things I would say. It's not, as I say, it's not very clear to me what is Pakistan getting out of this honeymoon. What is it asking? What is it getting? What does Pakistan actually want out of this honeymoon with President Trump? And then secondly, I think a vital question is President Trump, and it's a question many countries are asking, is this just a parenthesis in American diplomatic history? Like sooner or later that the system will snap back to its default position? Or is this, the new normal going forward for a number of years?
Right. Well, thank you so much. All these areas I was going to ask about, and you preempted me about China and India. So over to you, Hina Saiba, and where do you see this going in terms of Pakistan-US relationship and the precarious balancing act as we look at it, and how do you make sense of that, in terms of policy and future trajectory?
Yeah, sure. Okay, thanks. And okay, first of all, I think it's interesting that this is not a conversation which is only happening in a middle power, if you want to call it, country like Pakistan, but wherever you go in Europe, at various places, and anywhere else in the world, the rivalry and the competition, or whatever nomenclature you want to use, between US and China is at the forefront of whatever strategic discussions are happening. And this tightrope walking is not only for a country like Pakistan, but Singaporeans, many countries in Africa, many countries in the Middle East. And some countries have clearly chosen their path. So some countries have allowed themselves to be encamped. Because I think many of us perhaps remember, okay, first of all, I want to say that I think when the first Trump term came, a lot of us thought this was an aberration from a normal US trajectory. Now the second Trump term, I think it would only be foolish, as Mark Carney reminded us, nostalgia cannot be strategy, right? And it would only be foolish for us to keep on retelling ourselves that, oh, this is just an aberration from the post-1945 normal liberal order that the US was policing for the world. The US was happily taking up all the cost, asking no one to pay the bills, and saying your security is ours to keep because we are secure. Because that world is over. It's gone. And that world is likely never to come back. Okay? And the US in all of this, so I just want to start perhaps by saying that if you look at it, so we can either talk about the symptomatic issues. Trump said, for instance, to the Europeans in Davos yesterday or day before yesterday, that if it wasn't for us, you would all be speaking German or a little bit of Japanese. Okay? That was my favorite comment out of that 1.5 hours of really interesting comments. I made my children listen to that 1.5 hour over a dinner table because I thought it was so interesting for them to just absorb what is happening in the world, right? So this is no more an aberration. And this is a president who wrote in the Board of Peace that the veto lies only with the person of Donald Trump, not with the President of the United States of America today or later. This is a person who has said to media people who he invited to the White House to, treat nicely, that when they said, where's the predictability of the United States of America? He said the predictability is going to come from what my morals say and what I want to do.
Yes.
Okay, so Wali, when very learned people like yourself talk about the credibility and predictability and the deep state and the US is what we see the US to be doing right now. And what the US is doing right now is in many ways an aberration of everything that we've expected from a country like the US, who was supposed to be the policeman, the rule setter, the country which was making the rules for climate change, for trade, ensuring that everybody. Now the US is doing the opposite of that. In some ways, it is taking a big hammer and breaking down all those rules themselves. And we were told over the last 2 decades or so that it's autocrats which are threatening the liberal order. Who has threatened the liberal order? Today, China seems to be going many sort of strands ahead, whether it's solar power production. It is actually their cumulative production is more than the cumulative production, just solar, forget all of renewable. Theirs is about 1 gigawatt. I believe US is about 300 and Europe is about less than 500, right? So China alone is producing on an annual basis more than the cumulative production of solar energy. And when you talk about the future wars of AI, let's not forget, whatever technology we're able to achieve, eventually it is going to be based on the ability to have cheap energy.
Yeah.
Okay, and here President Trump reminded us that all of those people who go around putting up wind power are crazy people. Okay, so it's really a world that you could have never imagined to be living in.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and now this, where Pakistan I think should be commended, is that Pakistan was not nostalgic, as Mark Carney was reminding the world. And Pakistan just took the world as it was and decided to play with it.
Yeah.
Okay. However, I do want to say that the US's effort started, so China actually sold its manufacturing strength and the ability to provide cheap everything, but quality also, as opium to the masses. And all of Europe and all of the North Americans, like opium to the masses, was happily taking all of these cheap goods, services, and saying, oh, we are only for sophisticated industry. And guess what? They started being the only center that could produce sophisticated industry also. So Apple CEO then tells all of us that, listen, I need toolkit engineers, and if I want toolkit engineers in the US, I can't even fill a boardroom. This is what Tim Cook actually said. And if I go to China, I can fill soccer fields with it. So while we were all opium to the masses, China was growing, developing this skill set which everybody was letting go of. And today, then everybody woke up, and suddenly 2010, the whole thing about Asia pivot, however they wanted to say it, started. And then we heard about decoupling the world.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine a phrase like decoupling the world. Okay, it was, for someone who had been bred on, oh, liberal world order, this, it was like, what? It was a shock. We were told as ministers that let your industry die, let your, auto industry die, because it's not efficient, goddammit. Okay, and now let your EV industry die. It's inefficient compared to China. China is producing 12 million. China said 10 years back it would produce 3 million by 2025. It has produced 4 times more. So let the EV industries of the world die, but no, now you. And then the Europeans were smarter and they said, oh, decoupling cannot be possible, let's do de-risking. You know what? Project de-risking also failed. And then you had, again, I'm constantly giving the example of Canada because there's no other country which has been absolutely looking over the shoulder and saying yes, yes, yes to everything that the United States of America has done. Maybe Canada and UK are competing with each other, right?
Yeah.
So when a person, like when the Prime Minister of Canada ends up giving a speech at Davos, which sort of startled the world and basically said everything that everybody was thinking, but in words which mattered, which resonated, it's a really big wake-up call. And he said, that we are no more going to be part of the myth. So the myth has broken. Now for Pakistan, the tightrope walking is absolutely not a tightrope walking.
Okay.
I completely disagree with that. China is an absolute, credible, predictable, strategic, 3 times, partner to the US, which has absolutely always, through times, been predictable, credible, we know what to expect, we know what we'll get, we know what to do. Our military strength, our ability to go into technology, whereas Western countries were closing doors on our military side, technology, on many other things, the doors were only open there. I don't think any bonhomie, honeymoon, whatever we want to call it, with the United States of America. We absolutely do not want, it's very smart not to want to have the only current superpower on your wrong side. I think it's very smart to be on the right side. And you should have complete strategic clarity that this is a relationship which is of decades. We have absolutely no interest to get out of it. The de-hyphenation of Pakistan's relationship with that of Afghanistan is a really good thing.
Yeah.
And the re-hyphenation of Pakistan's relationship with the United States of America, with India, is also a very good thing. And I have said this repeatedly, I will say this again, we have Prime Minister Modi to thank for all the follies he made with not reading the Trump White House well, by not saying thank you 3 times, and for us being able to read the White House well. So I think we have only to congratulate ourselves for that.
Thank you, Hira. That's been your standard line about thanking Mr. Modi for all the follies that he sort of committed. But you heard Hina, Professor Wali, and the Pakistan's strong alliance with China and the policy of not annoying the superpower at the same time. So how do you see that from Washington DC? And since you understand both the countries well, how do you see Pakistan sort of figuring out its future relationship with the Western world, especially the US?
I mean, I think the way Hina put it is that Pakistan essentially is in a position, or it's good to be in a position to actually decide the way in which this is managed. I think one of the lessons of the India-Pakistan war was exactly the fruits of that strategic partnership. In other words, Pakistan's military performance, and then subsequent to that, the benefits that Pakistan is now getting with much greater military, particularly sale of jet aircraft, fighter jets, etc., is all fruits of that long-term, basically strategic partnership. And given that that war happened, and that likely that conflict would continue, it doesn't make sense for Pakistan to be thinking in any way of disturbing that strategic partnership with China, even on a military level. And then there's also a very deep-seated now economic, as well as industrial, energy, etc. relationship with China. But Pakistan also has to manage Washington and has to manage this relationship. I think the best, perhaps, outcome of this, whether it was intended by Islamabad or not, is that the way in which this relationship with President Trump has emerged has actually created a buffer with what might have been an American reaction to Pakistan's military performance, right? If you credit Chinese electronic and jet fighter systems, etc., you might have had much more of a bristling in terms of what does this military relationship mean, how does Pentagon think about it, but none of that has actually happened. Washington has not really reacted in any way to the sort of the hardcore of this strategic partnership, which is actually military. Right? And also Washington has not reacted to the notion of a Saudi-Pakistani strategic alliance, which is very clearly was intended as a reaction to Israel's actions on Qatar. It's almost a deafening silence in Washington about analysis in think tank community, in Pentagon, etc., about what does this mean? What does Saudi Arabia mean by it? What is it Pakistan actually willing to provide? Does it extend to Pakistan's nuclear umbrella? None of that is actually being discussed. And you could say that partly is a consequence of, quote unquote, that honeymoon. So at least for now, again, whether Islamabad planned it this way or it just happened, is that managing, you're using essentially one relationship to protect the other relationship and perhaps deepen it, right? That might in the long run not be a solution for Pakistan-US relations, but at least in the short term, it has had no consequences. Right. For a major war. I mean, you shouldn't downplay there are very, very few occasions where anybody at the White House has stayed up all night. since Trump came in. And two of them did over the Pakistan-India situation. And I was right, at least the Pakistanis said, thank you for staying up all night. And the Indians said, you shouldn't have stayed up all night because you had no influence on the outcome. But the reality is that the White House quite well understood what happened in that war. The president has repeated the performance of Pakistan's military downing Indian jets repeatedly, which means that he has that awareness. But it has not translated into any criticism or pressure on the Pakistan-China relationship. Nothing that you see publicly or materially. There's no demands that have been put before Pakistan. And so there is that palpable benefit.
Right.
Now, whether it would last, how far it would go, it remains to be seen. But it's very clear that Pakistan has found now more run room, if you would, on the military strategic front with China, on monetizing that relationship in terms of expanding its exports, and now also building into this relationship with Saudi Arabia in the process.
Correct. Well, thank you, and I'm glad you brought in the Saudi angle as well, and I'll also ask Hina about that later. But Hina, coming back to Pakistan-China relationship in particular, you were very clear about, 3 times you repeated, And while all of that's true, but what happened with CPEC is also a lesson that we need to sort of explore, because almost a decade ago, CPEC was this game changer. I mean, I remember everything's going to change with CPEC, our fortunes are going to change. And then suddenly, in 2018, 19, the Pakistani state or the government at that time almost slowed it down. Sitting ministers were accusing the Chinese contractors of taking bribes or malpractices, etc., to which the Chinese were really upset. And then, none less than General Bajwa had to fly to Beijing just to placate the Chinese counterparts. So, and since then we've been sort of struggling to reset the CPEC button. There's a security angle, of course, the Chinese engineers and workers feel endangered, just like Tajikistan or Afghanistan. And then there's, of course, Pakistan's own economic capacity to raise loans and to fulfill the obligations. So how far have we managed? I know the military side in May 2025 was spectacular, and we all sort of welcome that, but this economic side, and all of that, what you mentioned about solar revolution, manufacturing, the Chinese technological advancements are linked to economic development. Yeah.
It's very important to be very honest with yourself, right, as a nation and as a state and as a country. And I think it's very, very important for doing a deep dive self-analysis as to what went wrong. Okay, and to say CPEC is no more a priority would be wrong, but to say that that vote of CPEC being the flagship of the BRI, that vote passed, yes it did. Okay, and the reason it passed was not because China had any less intentions, was because we were not prepared or ready, and we were also not ready to be smart and, let's just say, I don't want to say not dependable, but I just want to say that we were not patient and we want to celebrate the success of something that was only opening. So we were very un-Chinese about it. So look at the Chinese and look at the Indians. Okay, I will not compare them to Pakistanis because I would not want to be that self-reflective. But let's look at the Chinese and the Indians. Okay, so the Chinese go for tens of years, decades on end, building their strength. And back in 2010, which was far, I'm that old, far enough. I was foreign minister. I remember going to a Chinese foreign minister and saying, the Americans also wanted, why don't you play some role in Afghanistan at that time? Afghanistan, the Americans wanted everyone in the room and being able to solve anybody. They wanted anyone to do whatever they can to norm. And the Chinese response was, Minister, we are just a developing country. We are too small. We have too many of our own issues, this, that, the other, okay? And now compare that to India. The West says, oh, you are going to be a central feature to our Asia pivot. And India says, oh, I have strategic autonomy, I will do whatever, I'm bigger in this, that, the other. Yes, you're big, but really they overplayed their strength to a point where, Wali, when you say that the deep state in the US hasn't really changed their views on, I think the view that the strategic altruism which was given to India's way, both in terms of the nuclear goodies and the exceptionalism that was given their way, and the exceptionalism in making them the really, the net security provider and within the bigger Asia pivot strategy and all of that. A lot of people in the West, especially Europeans, feel that when it came to Russia and Ukraine and when it came to other things, India felt it had much more strategic autonomy than that is expected from an ally which is willing to take the benefits, all the goodies, but not being able to give anything back, right? And then just started celebrating and I think that culmination really, the culmination for us was, yes, we won that war. Whatever you want to call it, however you want to say it. Eventually they attacked us, we were able to resist defensively and offensively, right? But that culmination was not only for Pakistan, it was for the whole world to see that this country, which was supposed to be the net security provider for the Western Hemisphere, for the entire Western Hemisphere, was the key of China containment project, okay, suddenly cannot hold its own borders. Okay, it was a really big wake-up call. So compare that with the Chinese. Keep on going on, nobody to find out until they're pushed and shoved to a point where they have to come out with some of their strength. Okay? China today is, China's naval strength is many times that of their ability for shipbuilding, etc. So there are many, and technology, AI, whichever area. I mean, as a long-term reader of The Economist, we were told by the very good school that I went to in grammar in 8th grade, कि Economist पढ़ लो, Newsweek और Time आप अक्लमंद बन जाओगे. And I think that kind of somewhat happened, right? So as a long-term, they don't celebrate China. And when you read in March 2024, I think was the first article that started coming in, China, the new scientific superpower. And they said in 2019, when I sent our people in China to see whether they have scientific, we were like, yeah, maybe. And today, they quoted how in Nature magazine, in all of these science magazines, the citations, how the universities are doing, they are actually, other than maybe bio, engineering, etc., in many other areas, they are far, far ahead in many ways. So this is what happens when a country is patient and able to. I'm now going, my objective was to answer the question on CPEC. So Pakistan was in some ways not patient enough, started celebrating CPECs without doing the work that needed to be done. And then the ministers that you quoted were ministers of an administration of a government which is exceptionally immature. Do not forget the comments that were made about PIA and how PIA was taken away from all. So those comments were just because of immaturity, right? Any smart person would never make comments on that. And I think on CPEC, I think we are in a different territory. I would only like to say that I think Pakistan has not done its part to fully benefit from a technological and an industrial benefit to its own industry and its technology that could have potentially been there as being a strategic partner of China. And that was not because China didn't want to do it, that was because we are less engaged in preparing ourselves in creating the ecosystem and more concerned about headlines about we have achieved this. But learn from China. What China does, it does the work first, it never makes the statements. Okay? We make the statements, never do the work. Yeah.
Good distinction. Thank you. Thank you. Last question, Wali, and which is, picking on the broad comment that Hina made about the world, looking at the camps. One is a rising camp, the Chinese power and the Chinese influence across the globe, and the other is the declining power. Even in the US, there's a lot of writing on this issue as to how the American empire may be declining. How do you see that happening, and what role or what implications it has for middle powers like Pakistan? I mean, and many other countries in the larger global context.
I mean, I think we have a tendency to approach this like historians. So we look at the sort of the grand, as Obama used to call it, grand arc of history. So China's rising, its GDP is rising, its capabilities are rising, America's is declining. Some of the things Trump is doing, moving away from energy, etc., is going to contribute to that. But we forget that we don't all get to live the full arc of history, and we're not at the end of it. We're all living in the short run. And for medium powers, I think this is particularly key because they haven't arrived at the end point. And so the short run really matters as to whether they get there or not. I mean, everything you were saying about CPEC, right, goes to that. This was a period, it could have had a very different outcome for Pakistan. It could have been worse, it could have been better. for countries like Pakistan is that how do they leverage this moment? And not to get obsessed with the fact that, okay, you know, the United States is declining, China's rising, because to me this is neither here nor there. It's more like cheerleading for at a football game, like who's winning. But the reality is that Pakistan has a window, and Pakistan has a set of problems. The question is, how can it leverage this window at this particular point in time in order to address its problems and change its own trajectory? I think middle powers have to be less concerned with where China and the US are heading and be more concerned with where they are heading. Right? And not in the very short term, but in the long term. And so I look at it that way. I mean, as historians, we can speculate about you know where the arc of history is going, but I think for policymakers, and let's say if you were in Islamabad or any other country, you know, the next 4 or 5 years really matter most. And I think where do you fit in that is actually the key issue.
That's a great answer, and I think that was going to be my next question, you know, about Pakistan's internal dilemmas, contradictions, and weaknesses, like the economy, for example. But I think I would actually go to the audience because we should get their questions, as many as possible. So before you ask your question, please note that I'm not going to let you make a speech, number one. Only one question per person, and keep it as brief as possible because we have to maximize the number of questions given the limited time.
Allow me first to say hi to this wonderful lady. She is one of my idols. I always say that. We shared a session last year. You have one of the best ministers of foreign affairs in the world, not only in Pakistan, okay? Just let me know. My question is not for you, I'll talk to you later, but it's for Mr. Vali. You spoke about the silence in the White House, and kind of like you made it sound positive, and that they only basically woke up or stayed late at night to monitor Pakistan, right? The situation, which is basically the Indian aggression on Pakistan at the time. Don't you think that silence is more frightening in terms of what they're planning to come ahead? And at the same time, they're monitoring the situation means they're monitoring the readiness of Pakistan in terms of war, especially that your back gate is Iran, your front gate is China, which makes you basically in a very tight geostrategic position that the Americans are very interested in if they want to topple it later on, just like they did with Afghanistan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I think you can start answering that because they are sorting out the mics. So mics please ले जाए लोगों के पास और तैयार रहे. So quick answer. Well,
I don't know if they are monitoring. I mean, I'm sure, you know, the Pentagon always monitors everything they see. But I don't think. But again, you know, true to form, usually you would have seen much more of a reaction, not just in the White House, but in the think tank community, in the political class, in all that would come from the top, about concern about how much has China and Pakistan worked together, what is the consequences of this. You even right now hear almost nothing about the sale of a jet fighter that is a joint production of China and Pakistan across many different countries, right? That Pakistan has now emerged as a major arms exporter thanks to the relationship with China. So, you know, you have to look at the evidence in front of you, right? That the kind of criticism, the kind of alarm, the kind of analyses, the kind of papers that would have been coming forth have not come forth. And what I say that, you know, that Secretary Rubio and Vice President Vance stayed up all night trying to defuse the situation. It was basically trying to talk to both sides to pull them back from what might have been an escalation. Whether or not they were effective, it means that for a 24-hour period, they were intensely focused on this war. So they were getting continuous reports, they were seeing what was happening, they were seeing performance on both sides, what was being shut down, what was not being shut down. So they're very aware of it in that sense. Now, how this will play out down the road, I really don't know. But looking at the evidence that is in front of us, is that the US did not react to the evidence of how China had built Pakistan's military capability was itself very telling. as we're speaking, there is no pressure on Pakistan right now on its military relations with China. If it comes 5 years from now, I don't know, under a different president. But there is right now no concern. The field marshal is not being asked to ditch the Chinese, is not being asked to slow down relations with the Chinese. None of that is being asked of Pakistan.
Yes, thank you, Wali. And actually, before we go to the next question, I'm being a bit whimsical. So, Hira, I think one point that Wali made was that what about the middle powers themselves and the window that they have? They have a window of a few years. And if we were to take that point, what are the 2 or 3 areas that Pakistan should be focusing on diplomatically, or in other terms, to seize the moment and make the most of this diplomatic capital or win that we've built in the last 10 months or so?
So very interesting that you asked this, because when Wali was speaking and when the question was being asked, I made a note to myself saying arc of history, one, because I wanted to ask Wali that some countries such as ours, I believe, who have probably been denied their full arc of history by notional governance structures, models being imposed on us, which are perhaps not ones which are intrinsic to our nature or our society or social fabric, etc. And so that's just one point. But I think when we ask the question, okay, what are we getting from the US? Yeah. Space. The space to be able to do what we want to do. Not to be told who to speak to, who not to speak to, sanctions, this, that, the other. You cannot want to be on the wrong side of a very, I don't want to say aggressive, but unpredictable superpower. Yes. Okay? You do not want to be on the wrong side of that.
Absolutely.
Superpower. So you have space. Now what do you do with the space was your question, Raja.
Yes.
And I think the answer to that question is very unsexy, very unglamorous, very something that Pakistan is just not able to do. And I want to use words which are not very civil. Because we are just not able to put our heads down and fix the ecosystem for our industry, for our governance,
yes.
for our SME, for our education. We just want to be on the most important table all the time and not use it for our advantage, but almost use it for our disadvantage.
Yes.
Because what needs to be done internally, no one can come and
Very
do
good.
it for you.
Very good.
No superpower, no emerging power. China can become what it will. Pakistan will not benefit from it until Pakistan fixes its own dilemmas, its own ecosystems. And just to share, at a very personal level, I've been to China many times, Beijing mostly, Shanghai, this, that, the other. For the first time last year, I went for a week and a half as a business person. We're doing something, it's just soft furnishing, this, that, the other. And I saw what they've been able to do, and it is mind-boggling. It's the ecosystem, it's the soft things, it's the things which which are not celebratory. They've just unleashed the potential of the commonest. And we think they're very smart, they're very disciplined. No, nobody is. Yeah. The government has to provide the space. So yes, fix the ecosystem. All of this, IMF-led type of, what hasn't worked well yesterday and 10 years back and 20 years back is not. Fix the ecosystem. Yeah. Fix the ecosystem, that's it.
Well said, well said. Thank you. So, give the mic to our questioner in green sweater, if I remember. खड़े हो जाएं आप, please. खड़े हो जाएं ताकि आपको दिखाई दें. Mike?
Am I audible?
जी, audible.
First of all, I would like to say that I am a fan of yours, ma'am, in Arabani, ma'am. My question is of general nature. I would like to ask 2 questions. One from Professor Saab and one from you. The very first question is from you, ma'am. What went wrong with us as a nation? There are a lot of problems in our country. Like ethnicity or some sort of problems. As we have, if we trace the history of China, China has gone through 100 years of humiliation. They were junkies, but they have now have risen as a great nation and now are creating the world order. What went wrong with us? And, first question.
What went wrong with us? And the second question? Quick.
Second question, Professor Saab, is from you. Why the world needs a kind of hegemon? What is the need of an hegemon? Why, like we see, multipolar, unipolar, why these heavy terms people use? Thank you.
Okay, so before you answer, let's get one more question. Let's add one more question.
Can we take it from here?
Okay. Which?
Here.
Okay.
On your
sure,
right.
Sure.
My question is, I'm just going to use this opportunity to ask what I want to ask. I want to quickly ask about Pakistan and Afghanistan because Hina has experience of going to Afghanistan as well when Taliban came into power. And so not just that particular episode, but what has happened to the supposed relationship and our strategy. And Professor Nasser, quickly, I don't know, I wasn't in the Gaza session, but if you can speak a bit about Iran's uprising and its potential impact on Pakistan because it's one of our important neighbors.
Okay, well, I guess here goes the whole session. What went wrong with Pakistan and the Iran uprising, and we can stay for 2 more hours. Okay, so on Sunday there's it, but Hina, why don't you start with what went wrong?
Listen, smart countries, smart people never look back at what went wrong and spend too much time on it. They just learn their lessons from history and move on and fix the future. We are absolutely, I cannot tell you how much this, and I don't say this because it sounds cool, okay? This country has so much. Look at our memes, look at how we came together during the war with India. I mean, we were like all over the place. We were as good as it gets. We were smart, agile, on the dot, on the ball. We have it in us, we just need discipline. हम मेहनत करने से भागते हैं. We are not a hardworking. I think we have absolutely, so nothing went wrong with us. A lot of wrongs were done to us by ourselves. We can fix those wrongs. I have absolutely no doubt. We just need the ecosystem. But when ecosystem is something which refers to major long-term fixes, right? Not just headline news. It requires hard work. It requires, just patient hard work. And I think we can fix it. Pakistan, Afghanistan, God. I mean, that's something, this time when I came into office, who's currently our ambassador in Geneva, very, very smart person in the Foreign Office, and the Foreign Office is filled with smart people. My DG, he said, Madam, aap kyun apna time waste karti hain Afghanistan mein, kuch nahi badalne wala. And I said, aapne pichli baar bhi ye kiya, because I'm obsessed with the neighbors, okay? Because I think you need to fix your again, it's your boundaries. You need to be peace within and out, and if you constantly embroiled in tensions, aaj border pe ye ho gaya, kal wo ho gaya, how will you ever fix, your relations and have time for it, okay? So, unfortunately, East closed itself to us when Modi came in because Pakistan was really on a very good trajectory vis-a-vis India. Pakistan had learned its lesson from history, wanted to fix everything. We were really bending backward, normalized trade, everything. And then they just decided to take this down. We did many wrongs before that, but after that, I think now it is part of their ethos, it is part of what they've selected for themselves to be anti-Muslim, anti-Pakistan, to be deeply, deeply Hindu, to be divisive, etc., etc. So no matter what we do, somersaults, whatever we do, that's not going to change. And smart people, again, strategically speaking, when there is time to just do nothing. So for India, there's time to do nothing. For Afghanistan, one asked the question, what were we thinking? Selling them to the whole world, taking on the whole world for them? Now we have them. Gift is there. Enjoy it. Okay. Now we're going to the whole world saying, oh, they're impossible, they're so difficult. So I used to feel very silly. I was telling the whole world how, and now I'm telling the whole world, 10 years back I was in the same office telling the world a whole different thing. And I'm like, will they think I'm mad or they're mad or who's mad? Okay, so what were we thinking when we thought that they were supposed to be in our strategic interest? Now they are who they are. You don't get to choose your neighbors. You can't pluck yourself and plant yourself in a different place. Yes, we have tried love, emotion, goodwill, everything, and it doesn't work very well. We have tried hardball, softball. I have spent, will not say wasted, was the first minister from a foreign country to arrive in Afghanistan, a lady, and I was on point. So cut a long story short, I'm fully against closing the borders with Afghanistan because that's denying geography and that's ensuring that your Central Asian Republic and your trade and everything, you become unpredictable, you have no credibility. No nation ever wants to be that. However, we should never ever compromise on our security. So if the security of Pakistanis precedes the security of Afghans. And for that, whatever we have to do to secure ourselves, we must. There are many, many soft things that we can do to give hard pain, okay, to elements who are in power. We don't need to resort to giving pain to the Afghans. We must be able to draw the line. And I think it's not that difficult, and I think some consistent behavior would certainly help or can help that relationship.
Great. Wali, you want to quickly respond to the Iran? I know there's a session on Sunday, but there's an anxiety because Pakistanis think we are already vulnerable on the western border. From the east, we have Indian threat, and if something regime change, quote unquote, happens in Iran, then Pakistan is cooked, so to speak. God forbid.
I mean, cooked might be too much, but definitely they will have varieties of impacts. So, of course, if you have a situation of collapse of state or chaos, the fate of Balochistan will matter to Pakistan. The issue of refugees would matter. Also, Iran and Afghanistan, their economies are much more integrated and now have become more integrated since Pakistan has closed its borders with Afghanistan. There's large numbers of Afghans who work in Iran, are basically the labor force in Iran by and large as a major Afghan component. So in a situation of chaos, that border would dissolve. And then what does it mean for Afghanistan? What does sort of a non-border between Iran and Afghanistan mean for that? So essentially, you could say the Afghanistan as an issue for Pakistan can basically extend into Iran, and this might become sort of a single problem. And then there are scenarios in which it has a war with Iran, a chaos in Iran will have a major impact on the Gulf economy and other ones. And Pakistan's economy, Pakistan's strategic relationships with the Gulf are also vulnerable to that issue. Now, these are all worst case scenarios, but short of these things, I mean, if there's just chaos, just change of regime in Iran of varieties of kinds, a limited confrontation with the US that does not cause a collapse of the state, then I don't think it has major material impact. And the final thing I would say is that, the Islamic Revolution in Iran was a major reason for the rise of Islamism as a political force globally. So if there is an end point, it will have an impact on that entire trend across the Muslim world, and that will have an impact on Pakistan as well. How I don't know, but I cannot see that Pakistan and the entire Islamic politics in Pakistan would be impervious to a message as large as that the Islamic Revolution, Islamic Republic is over.
Well, that's a really insightful response. Thank you. So we have just a few minutes left. I don't know who has the mics there. Oh, there are too many hands. Okay, one there and.
Pakistan honeymoon period is too short, is it?
We'll take that. Okay, honeymoon period. Okay, वहाँ दे दे. Born homie or whatever. जी, बोले.
Hello everyone.
One question quick, please.
My question is for Ms. Hina, and I wanted to ask that you mentioned that this is the new normal. Why do you think that? Do you think that the US establishment will destroy its own order where it's the hegemon?
Okay. And the mic इधर भी ले आइए जरा mic. यहाँ पर काफी देर से हाथ उठा रहे हैं. ले आइए. So short. Why is the honeymoon short? I think that was Wali. I think that's for you. Enough for you the question that was just asked. And we'll take one more, and then maybe one more, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, very short two questions to Ms. Hina.
Very short two questions. Very short one question, please. Negotiation.
Very short one question. Ms. Hina Rabanika, the German Chancellor, because I live in Germany and you have been to the Munich Security Conference and I was listening to you. The German Chancellor went to India and was overwhelmed by the large market in India. So do you think at the end of the day, the European Union, Germany, but also the United States would prefer India because of the larger market? And what do you think about the speech of Gavin Newsom in Davos, calling the Europeans very pathetic and disgraceful for being so submissive towards Donald Trump? Would you agree or disagree? Gavin Newsom.
Can
said
you
that-
repeat? Can you repeat?
Gavin Newsom, the Californian governor of California, said that Europeans are very pathetic. Would you agree or disagree?
Okay, pass the mic to this young man here. So Gen Z must be given their due, otherwise they'll write articles berating the boomers and us. Acha.
I want to ask Madam Hina Rabbani Khair about the narrative that was built by the 2018 government led by Khan Saab that absolutely not to America and then going back on CPEC. What were its implications? And I was reading a book the other day about it from Sadruddin Hashwani. He writes that the Dari Saab is a very seasoned politician. He said after a global tour that he found out that all the global leaders are very stupid. Zardari Saab is a very seasoned politician and I look forward to be mentored by him, inshallah. So, what makes those leaders stupid?
Okay, quality of leadership in general. So over to you, Hina. You have most of the questions and then we'll ask Mali about why the honeymoon is short or not.
Okay, first of all, the question about the new norm. I don't think I am the one saying it. I don't consider what I say to be important at all. I consider what is happening in the world, what the world is doing, what leaders are doing to be very, very important. And I think it is kind of stupid to ignore trends, not because I look into the glass mirror and because of what's happening. Climate change, trade normalization, being the policeman, keeping the lanes open, etc. These are typically the jobs which were associated with being a superpower, that you create common goods, you become the protector of the common goods, right? You create norms of behavior, etc. around it. The USA has gotten out of the Paris Climate Agreement. The United States of America is getting out of UN organizations, which it happens to be the biggest funder. This is the fall of, or the breaking up of the post-1945 order, which was made according to Carney's also admittance, for certainly the benefit of the most important and the most powerful nations, perhaps at the cost of others, but it worked for everyone in terms of giving predictability and order. That order no more exists because the world has changed, has transformed. Okay, if you look at the trade numbers of US and China, if you look at percentage of GDP contribution, etc. to trade, the world has changed completely. You know, Germany was the second largest economy, it no more is. The world has completely changed, but the rules haven't changed. And when you look at the Security Council and the 5 P5s and you look at their real power in the world, it is no more matching. Okay, so the world is different and the rules and norms are different, and the US now itself is going literally with a hammer and breaking down those things and saying, I'm not willing to pick up this cost anymore. It is saying it's too much for me. I do not want to be the policeman anymore. What is the, how do you analyze what the United States president keeps on saying? Bring it to 5% of GDP, make your own cost. We are not going to send troops anymore, etc. They're saying, enough, we are not willing to be the policeman. That is like saying, we don't want to be the, the country which just pays all the bills and holds. So I'm not saying that this is actually, I'm just reading what's happening in the world, right? Then the other question was about global leaders being stupid or not. No, absolutely. I mean, I don't know. I think there are stupid people and there are not so stupid people. There are stupid leaders and not so stupid leaders. There are stupid practitioners and not so stupid. I mean, I think that's not. I have found many leaders who are very, very impressive. I was just, there was a time that we all found Erdogan very impressive. I remember the time when I was in the hall when Erdogan left Davos, never to come back, because he said, you gave the Israeli Prime Minister too much time and you did not let me explain even for 2 minutes. And that was a moment where you felt this guy was a leader for more than just Turkey, right? And then there were other times when you felt otherwise. So I think you have to judge people and leadership by what they do rather than what they say. I think that is what is important, and what they do is shown in the fate of their countries, what they say is shown in their Twitter feeds only, right? And that is how I distinguish a good leader and a bad leader from a leader which does something which shows in the countries, future, past, present, where they look, where they are. And a bad leader is one who keeps on propping himself up or herself up in various ways. Last question was on the German Chancellor. Look, why are we obsessed with who is going to befriend or not befriend? And India is a large country with immense technology, with an economy many times the size of, with everything that many countries are going to go for it. Of course they will. Does that in any way harm our interests? Absolutely not. We need to get out of this mindset of India versus Pakistan. Not at all. Okay, we need to see where is Pakistan. Does Pakistan provide that market? Is Pakistan able to partner with technology? We need to obsess with ourselves rather than try and get the Amartya Sen type of an identity which he says is one which is against another. Why not one which is for Pakistan? So I'm absolutely unobsessed with the idea of where India is and completely obsessed with the idea of where Pakistan is. And I think that is where we should put our energy, our mind, and everything else in. And your last question was when the Californian governor said, who may be a contender for presidentship, as you may know, and a strong democratic leader who's emerging. So he, Democrat leader, sorry, not democratic, asking the Europeans to, they're being dismissive. Actually, as a matter of fact, I think it's very interesting because my reading is quite the opposite, because after everything that President Trump said about Greenland, and he said a lot, meaning it was so interesting for him to say that, you do this, otherwise I will do that. And then saying to Denmark, okay, you're not able to do whatever, and we are the one who. But it was very interesting how he said to Emmanuel, if you were wearing your glasses, right, etc. So it's literally comes to the stage and he starts taking his jabs on people and going very, very personal, and it's quite interesting. But what he said about Greenland, the tariffs that he did not only say, but he said, abhi 10% hai, and in 3 months there will be 20. He actually he did things about it, right? Then for him to walk back from that and to say on the stage in Davos that the United States of America will not take any military action on Greenland, which was the concern of the Europeans, it's because the Europeans really pushed back, and because that was, I believe, the final straw, which they said that we cannot take this blackmailing anymore. And in that, today I was reading in the New York Times that they have agreed because of negotiation where they have allowed them to put military bases. That was always on the offer. It's nothing new. So it's a narrative shaping around it. So in fact, I do not think the Europeans were bullied in any way. However, again, I was reading a book by Henry Kissinger, rereading on World Order, in which he says a very interesting thing, which I will read. That will be my last thought to leave. That there are very few countries or, in the world, or states or, regions in the world, which you would look at the European Union as, which give away their strategic strength themselves. So when Europe decided to go after the many, many wars post-1945, to give their entire burden or part of the burden to the US of preserving their military space and becoming their protector and preserver, they in some ways gave away that strength willingly. And they reaped the benefits because they were now spending no percentage of GDP on military and spending on education, health technology, this, that, that. But now they have to pay the price for it. Because either they play ball with the US, they cannot give a threat to the US and say we will attack, we will do this. I mean, it is said that if US decides to pull back now, many of the F-35s that they own, they will not be able to fly. It is said that much of UK naval strength may not be as demonstrative. If the so interoperability and how the NATO was seen to be an alliance which was never going to fray. So we're living in a world which we never really, which was actually thinking the unthinkable. It is actually an unthinkable world that we're living in, so anything is out. Anything could happen.
Anything could happen. And last word for you, Professor Nasser.
So, why is the honeymoon short? Honeymoons are by definition short. And